Okay, so we are adding in some detail to this 2-point perspective. So what we have drawn is a basic shape, right? It's not a perfect cube, but it's a box, a cube-ish 22 by 22 by 18 space. And we have that scale based on how we've drawn these scales, right? So we've got dimensions down here to go off of. We've got dimensions vertically to go off of, horizontal and vertical. The horizontal ones are a little different proportion than the vertical because we're actually drawing essentially at a 45-degree angle if it were orthogonal, right? So that was from last time. And then one of the things that we know when we look at what we've drawn already is we have, it's a 2-point perspective with our center line in the middle. It's a midpoint between the 2 points. And when we do that, and we draw a perfect square, these two points align horizontally, these 2 points align vertically. So what we can do is draw a horizontal line that then becomes the center of that square in space down here. We can ignore these little lines for now. These can be ignored. But so we've got this and this as this center of that square. So when I want to draw other detail elements, I can look at my plan, right? So now what I'm drawing is the plan, these lines coming in, and the thickness of the wall going out. So this is the wall, this is the top of the light cove, base of the bench, face of the bench, and then the opening above. And I know some of those dimensions off of the drawings that we have, right? So if we start with the opening in the ceiling above. So if I want to draw the opening in the ceiling up here, I'm going to start by starting to draw out these elements in the plan. So if I know that it's 11 feet square, then I can start to measure this over, right? So here's 2, 4, 6, 8, 10, 12 feet over. That 11 feet comes right in the center. So I would want to measure out half of that distance, right? So 5.5 feet, 5.5 feet, that gives me that 11 feet. So 2, 4, and there's 5. And we did this at a 1/2-inch scale. So if I take my 1/2-inch scale, I go over 5.5 feet. That's 6 inches. There's 5.5 feet right there. Because we did these at, each of these ticks each foot is a 1/2 inch along here. 5.5 feet. Then I can project that line back to the vanishing point. And I can do it from that vertical and that horizontal that we drew through here, which are the diagonals through that square in space. So that's one side of the opening in the ceiling. Then I can do the others. I only have to use that measurement once because now I can do the others using those as reference points because I know in space these points are always going to line up with that vertical and horizontal. I'm just drawing additional squares inside of that other square, or outside in the case of the exterior wall. So that's the opening in the ceiling in plan. So you can kind of see that, right? If you see this in perspective, you can see that this is the sort of like drawing the floor plan in a three-dimensional drawing, 2-point perspective of the floor plan. So to project that up into this space, I can pull these lines up from these points, right? It gives me these points. Just like we did with these, I can pull these up. And then I know, again, each of these squares are going to have the same relationship in terms of having that horizontal line, perfectly horizontal line is going to connect those diagonals if I drew it accurately. We'll see how closely I did this. Not too bad. So now I've got this line and this line, which are the diagonals of this plane, horizontal plane in space. And then I have these 2 points, which come from these 2 points to give me where the opening in that ceiling will be. So now I can project those points back to the vanishing point to be able to draw the opening in the ceiling. And again, what you'll discover is if I've drawn it accurately, they will meet in the middle again, right? They'll come right back and meet in the middle. You're going to have tiny inaccuracies that will amplify themselves as you start drawing things in perspective. Some of that just comes from the thickness of the pencil line itself. So don't get too frustrated about that, but do your best to make sure that these do line up as accurately as you can. But that gives us the top line, and that's essentially how we start to add detail. So if we're drawing the outer walls and the roof, that would be the other thing we might want to try to figure out. So the outer walls, the walls that come around this, we know are about a foot thick. So if we are looking here, again, we come back to this measurement on the bottom, and we measure over 1 foot. And that point now, we pull back to that vanishing point. If I do that, that's going to bring it 1 foot inside, right? So what I want is to have it be a one foot outside. So if I go over to this one instead, that gives me that 1 foot outside. And once again, I know they're going to meet here and they're going to meet here. So I can project this back. And I can project this back. And then I can go over here and I can project this over. So I'm a little off of center there. I may want to adjust that line a little bit. It just does look like these are a little bit too, those aren't quite the same line. Again, it's just those little errors that occur just from the thickness of the pencil sometimes that creates that error. So I've got some basic understanding of what the outside of the outside walls look like. I can project those up. And that gives me the outer walls. So it's kind of like we're almost drawing this as an X-ray, but those are the outer walls. So if I also then want to understand the height. So this is a way of getting these horizontal dimensions figured out, right? How to draw these horizontally correctly. You can draw it in plan down here, project them across from that ruler you've created, and then pull them up. turn it around the square and pull them up. To get the vertical dimensions correct, like to understand where this line stops and where this line stops, I can pull that horizontal line across, right? And that will tell me where the top of that wall is, but the wall actually extends to the top of the roof. So it needs to go up another foot for the roof. To get that measurement, I got to come back to my vertical measurements, right? So this is giving me my horizontal measurements in plan. These are giving my vertical elements, vertical dimensions, which are ultimately what we would see in section. So here I can measure up a foot, and this we did at 3/8 of an inch, right? Because it had that different proportion. So a foot is going to be right there. Hopefully it's still on camera there. It might be kind of pushing the top of that camera. I can pull that back to the vanishing point. And then I can pull this inside wall up. So now I've just taken, basically, this is that inside wall that we drew. This is one of the first walls that we drew, right? The inside face of it. I'm pulling it up here to the top of the roof. Obviously the ceiling is here, but I'm just trying to get this point figured out. Once I've got this plane and this point, again, the same principle applies. If I can keep drawing planes in space, I can draw horizontal across, and I can know where the rest of the elements in space will line up. So, I'm coming from here, this 1 foot up from that wall, coming out, that's going to be the top of the wall in space. The top of the roof where it intersects the top of the wall. So that kind of becomes the outer shell of the building, right there and there. This is the inside plane, that's the outside plane. And we'll need those lines right when we start to draw this as a section. So I can project this back. And that becomes the top of the roof. So it's very close to that, but not quite, right? So that's just because we're drawing in space. Things are moving around in that space. And this is, pulling, so this is actually, these are in the same plane horizontally, but because we're getting so much distortion now as this moves up, it's almost, starting to seem like it's higher, but it's not. They're in that same horizontal plane. So that's that. So now I'm going to draw the opening in this wall and its thickness. So this will start to take shape now. We'll start to understand what we're drawing here in a moment. So that opening we know it's 6 feet wide, and it's in the center of of this wall, and 6 feet wide. So if we drew this wall at something like 22 feet, which is what we did, 22 feet, then we'll come over 11 feet. This would be 11. You can again look at that in your 1/2-inch scale if you want. 11 feet right there. And then the opening is going to come over 3 feet on each side. So it's going to come back to this point and back to this point. 3 feet and 3 feet. So that's 6 feet wide. So we can take these 2 points and we can pull those back to this vanishing point. And I'm just going to draw it sort of mostly right here to give myself the thickness cutting through the wall. It's going to end up extending where the benches are too, right? But for now, that'll just extend through the wall. This next line, I think I'm going to need my other triangle in there to get to 14 feet. So I can make sure that that line is straight. And then we're going to come up with those lines. We've got this one coming up and this one coming up. And this is where it becomes really important to keep track of what plane you're drawing in. So when I project this line up, it's coming from this inside face of the space, right? It's the inside of the wall. So when I project up, I want to make sure that I'm also placing that line on the inside wall in space, not the outside wall. We don't have the outside wall drawn down here, so that makes it a little bit easier to understand, but that's where that's going to come in. So then we know, so these are the two on that inside face. These are the two lines that form the sides of that. The top of it is at 7 feet, right? Not 8. So we initially started this wall down here, and then we drew a line up here at 8 feet, which would be the top of the benches. The top of the opening is a foot down from that. So I'm looking at my 3/8 inch coming down a foot. That would be 7 feet off of the ground. And that is my opening along the side, along this plane. And if I want to project that forward, I can just take those 4 points and I can start to do that. Pull them back to that vanishing point. I pulled them in a little bit because I know we've got the benches and stuff in here coming in. I pulled it out because I know we've got the tunnel coming out, and we can start to construct those things. Where the wall comes in, it's going to be that would be again determined by that horizontal line at the bottom. That gives me that point. So that means the wall thickness is about right there. So this is, again, this, if you just look at this, it starts to get very confusing. But the point is to, in your brain, make sure you're just keeping track of what you're doing. You're looking at the plan, and these should line up fairly closely. Yeah, they do. This point lines up with that line. This point lines up with that line. So that, you want to just make sure you're keeping track of what plane you're drawing in. So this line is in the outside wall plane. This line's on the inside wall plane, and we're drawing that in 3 dimensions. So I'm gonna pause this right now, and this will be one video. I'm going to make a second one today, though, that starts to clarify this even more and start to add in more detail. But I'll pause this right now, and hopefully this will give us some good clarity.